But we'll see.
Yeah. So, yeah. So this pretty much fleshes out everything needed. The design tab. This is pretty well fleshed out. One thing I wasn't happy here is the way you select mockups and say edit them or remove them or change one mockup at a time. This needs some fine tuning. The pattern I was going for is something like a modal system.
Yeah.
So it's read only initially. When you hit the edit button, it becomes editable. The whole grid becomes editable, very similar to what you see on an iPad or an iPhone. So when it's editable, you can select and remove them in bulk, or select and replace them. So this is something that needs a bit of UX work.
Yeah. Have you thought about that you drag and drop a kind of functionality?
Yes. Drag and drop is something. So to get you up to speed about, from James's point of view, what he was thinking was we would tackle anything to do with, because this is backed by Git, Git LFS. So there would be a secondary, another repository in the project, which stores all the mockups. So what he was thinking was we would, as an MVC, we would build all the Git repository related features first, and then look at what needs to be done on the database, which means things like metadata, which is having a custom title for the mockup, or reordering of the mockup, that it's not possible on the first iteration. So he wanted to do that to keep the complexity minimal, and I sort of agree, which is why we decided to not make this public and to put this behind a feature flag before we could add the minimum amount being ordering, because only ordering helps a designer convey a user story through this. So that was the minimum amount that I had set. We need to be able to order, and in order to set the order, they need to build some database-related functionality. So that was roughly how the roadmap for this feature was planned.
And what about the commenting on designs? Is that something that is,
commenting is after reordering. So initially, you would be able to view the designs. Commenting was a little interesting because Bob was looking at it and he didn't really have a solution, because he had two ideas, which is either replicate what we already have with discussions, or use the existing diff discussions system as such. He wasn't familiar how it was implemented, and that was something he wanted to explore further down the line. So again, that's we haven't decided that yet. Couple of things we have decided is how the versions are handled. So every time somebody changes an image, every time somebody changes the order, a new version is created. So basically, when the story changes, when the title is changed, I didn't want to create a new version, because that would create a lot of nuisance versions. It'll create too many versions. It becomes unmanageable. And at any point in time, a version can be made as the how do I say it? As a starting version. It's very similar to how Google Docs.
Yeah.
Very similar.
Would it be so that, for example, if you go in edit mode of the story, it will mean that you can edit multiple screens before saving and creating a new version, right?
Yes. And when you can modify multiple mockups, which means changing the title, replacing the image, or removing them, and then when you hit save, you'll be asked to create something like add a note and save changes. This is basically a commit message behind the scenes.
So that makes so much sense, by the way.
And this commit message would also go in, and it'll help start the discussion. It'll go into the discussion tab as a new discussion. So all that made sense. and this part is done, which is creating discussions on. This needs some fine tuning. Little details like how when clicking on the image. I didn't go for things like rectangular or some kind of markup because there are some tools in which you can draw a rectangle and that area is highlighted as an annotation. I don't want to make that all that complications. This is just tap to start a conversation on that spot.
I have to say that I wanted to touch upon that exact topic of that you create a selection area rather than a specific point that can be in the neighboring area of that point which it indicates towards. And I used it or tried it out a little in the Google design tool.
It has that.
Symbols or something. It is nice, I gotta say. It makes so much more sense than just a single point.
Okay. I mean, from an implementation point of view, because initially I spoke to a couple of front-end engineers. Paul Slaughter was supposed to work on this this modal interface, and he also raised some concerns on how much we can build in a single milestone. So that was something that influenced some of the decisions. And this numbering is basically a way to keep track of the conversation, because the conversation doesn't really have a starting point. So that is sort of like a conversation ID kind of thing. It's not the number of comments. And so that was something. So Paul was to be working on the front end, and Bob and maybe Osvaldo. I'm not sure if Osvaldo is still going to be working on this. And I guess that's it. So this would need some, so this would need some UI fine tuning, like what the cursor should look like, and this still doesn't have the more button, which has delete and other miscellaneous things. And the thing is, this should open full screen. That was one thing that I was very adamant about with James. It should hide all GitLab branding. That's the only way to give enough real estate to show some mockups here. That was something. And I think this is like a good foundation for us to. One other thing was this project title. We need some UI here to make this editable when that is possible. So maybe something like a pencil button to click and this becomes editable.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And most of this is documented. I mean, I would have mentioned the user stories below. Nice. And finally, the discussions. This is straightforward. This is.
And this is every time a new version is created, this will be posted in the discussion tab, right? Yes.
A diff of what has changed. And the first comment will be the commit message of that discussion. Very similar to what happens when you create a diff. When you comment on a diff, you have the comment diff, and right below that you have the comment, and that starts the diff discussion, right? Very similar to that.
Have we thought about this displays the diff of the latest version, right? Like what got changed or what got added. And it mostly only shows what got added. Does it also show what got removed?
Yeah, it can definitely show what got removed, like maybe with a red border. Okay. That red and green, we can use the same color scheme that we already use.
And my second question was, so I can understand that in the discussion thread, chronologically, you want to see like, hey, this is version 20, version 19, going to discuss the changes. But in the description, it would be nice if you can always see the latest leading version with the complete story in there, right?
Yeah. Like so in the design tab, you would always see the latest version.
Okay, so you don't want to have that immediately visible in that sort of like mini diff state.
Yeah. No, not at all. Just like the changes tab in the merge request page, you only see what is latest.
Okay.
And when you open something or when you change the version, this is roughly how the changes tab itself is, correct? Right? Like you have the versions drop down and change the version. So that's it. So it's still familiar. One other thing that I experimented upon, but we didn't add it into this was something that me and James had had a lot of discussion over, but I decided to go with I actually
a
wanted
little
to have
dry. I
something
didn't
close
get the
to.
last
I'm
sentence.
trying. Okay, I'm trying to
You
open
were
the.
discussing with James and then something.
Yeah. So can you see my sketch window?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So this was one of the alternatives that I had proposed to the design tab, which is like a design section as part of the description. This I felt was a better solution because it kept the source of truth closer to the description, and we had a lot of discussion around this, but he felt a design tab was stronger. We never really settled this argument, but maybe I would love to hear what you. I mean, if you have a different idea on it, or this is something.
This was basically what I was thinking as well. Though
Yeah.
I'd like to see this as an addition towards the tab. So this just shows the latest version and no configurability or anything. You just can click on it and jump right into the latest version of that.
Yeah. And when you click on it and one image opens up, that becomes the screen to both comment and edit the metadata. And that was, that felt like it made sense to me, but I couldn't really convince James. And we ran out of time with that part of discovery. So this idea is still there. I mean, it's in page 3 of the file. It's there in my design files.
You can find the files through the issues, right? There's some system.
Yes. The issue IDs are all there.
Nice.
And mostly my style of organizing, I would mostly use pages to organize newer proposals. So if I'm making a big, like usually the last page will have the proposal that is there on the issue that is closed. But if you go to the previous page, you'll see other explorations that I had done. Like these are very early mock-ups.
Nice. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So this will be fairly easy to navigate.
I'm so excited for this feature.
Wow, this is amazing. It's a mini Envision inside GitLab.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing that I've noticed with, small additions or, the beginnings of ideas, and then you implement the first version, and then you see like, oh my, this really gets new value in there, new possibilities, and, ways to explore how this thing can really work. I don't know, simple things can make a big impact, I think.
Yeah. We're just scratching the surface. Yes, so design management is the big thing. The merge request widget, we planned a lot of small improvements.
Are you using a Bluetooth mouse, by the way?
I'm now using a trackpad, the Magic Trackpad.
Okay.
When I'm designing, I use the mouse.
I was wondering, I saw your Bluetooth icon. I was wondering, like, what are the peripherals that he's using? Because you're not using AirPods. So it's like, oh, what's going to be?
Oh, my AirPods are, my right ear is dead.
Oh, really?
That's It barely lasts like 10 minutes of battery. So super merge request, that is something.
Yeah, I was really, so funny note, side note is I was creating this change for personas. It was just a small change, right? But I had to create 4 merge requests in 4 different projects for that to go through.
Yeah.
4 merge requests. That's insane.
That would be solved with this one, which is merge order.
Yeah, it's going to be a real up for non-monorepo projects.
Yeah. So the idea here is very simple. Have like a interface, something like this, where you can specify one merge request after another, and that linear order will determine how merge requests are merged.
Oh, I'm freezing out. My internet should be stable. I got the extender here again.
I guess it's on my end. I'm actually moving, so most of my stuff are packed, and I got another week here. Yeah. Anyway, so something what me and James were discussing were a UI exactly like this. Below the mar widget, that would display the order in which the merge request gets merged, which would mean some of the use case would be highlighting which merge request we are in, when it'll be executed, or scenarios like when there's a pipeline failure and the merge stops, how to handle that. Those are the tricky things. One UI exploration that this was something we discussed in the meeting. I didn't have time to prototype, was something like a mini pipeline graph. We could take the mini pipeline graph pattern and adapt it to, because the merge order is linear. There's never going to be any branching in it. We could show something like that for merge requests, pipeline graph kind of. So that was one.
And by the way, from my understanding, so the super merge request interface, is that something? Is that an issue, yes, or does it live on the group?
Yeah, so we got rid of that because originally that was intended for VMware, and they when they started discussing about it, the scope became really overblown. So anything to do with the old super merge request issues, they're all pretty much dead. And James really doesn't want to build something really, really complicated. So we're only going to look at this first merge order. And this would, and James is confident that this will solve our problem, which is handling the different projects that GitLab has. So we solve our problem first, and then we figure out what our customers want, because VMware really is not clear. They're asking for something really, really complicated.
So, and from my understanding, right, one of the problems that we have, and which I was explaining, but I think that it's also stated here, is that if I create two merge requests in two different projects, and I want them to be reviewed because they fix the same issue, you know, like it's one issue that has two merge requests in two different projects.
Yeah.
So how do you get that reviewed, for example, or that you register those two merge requests being related to that one issue for one place? Is that what this is solving, or is this solving a slightly different problem? This is mostly
this is not solving the review problem just yet. Okay. This is only solving the fundamental problem of having dependent projects be consistently merged. That's
okay.
Have the same version. But as far as review is concerned, one of the things that we were just ideating was having reviewing, the action of reviewing, like a task. Right now, we communicate reviewing by assigning the merge request to somebody. You're like passing the ball to the next person and asking them to review. Maybe instead of using the assignee field, because there's a issue I found to have multiple assignees for a merge request, and when that happens, this little trick doesn't work. So we could add another field there as a reviewer field. So whose review is pending, and maybe make review into some kind of a workflow. That requires very holistic thinking. And then James wasn't really clear whose stage group this would belong under, and so we were just ideating there. And that is anyway independent of this particular problem. That is thinking of review as a higher concept.
All right, sounds good. So this is going in 11.9.
Yes.
So it's
This
already
is
worked
not
out.
UX ready yet. There's a chance this will slip because the backend, most of the work hasn't been done yet.
You mean in terms of design or in terms of development?
Development,
So
the backend work.
can you show what, I mean, does this have any mockups or?
Mm, not yet. I'm not fully up to date on this because James did change a whole bunch of this stuff, and we hadn't fully caught up yet. But yeah, there's a good chance that this won't make it. This will happen in the next milestone.
Okay, interesting. So you'd say that still needs to be detailed out a little further.
Yeah. Because as far as the UI is concerned, there's really nothing here. It's just something like this and a few edge cases. But the challenge that they were facing was I forgot what. They were mostly facing the challenge of when merges fail, how to revert those that had succeeded. That was one problem. I remember James saying. He would have a better explanation, definitely.
So you mean that if like the first merge request passes and it got merged, then if a subsequent merge request fails to get actually merged because I know for whatever reason, then the first pipe or merge request get reverted automatically.
Yes.
Interesting. What if the revert fails for something?
Yeah, that's a really crazy situation. And another thing we were worrying was whether to make this a default feature, because 99% of the teams won't need something like this, and this is only used by really big companies who have so many distributed projects coming together to be a single product.
So microservices, right?
Yeah, this is something even James didn't have a clear idea on where to put this feature in. And one thing I proposed was to hide this in the project settings, because say only 1% of the users need it. So why make it default? But his argument was, if we don't make it default, how will people discover it? But I still stand by my decision, because I think this should be hidden away, because only 1% need it. Nobody really is going to need something like this.
I mean, I would say initially I'm the same fence as you. On the other hand, I can see the value of getting feedback through exposure. And it might have unexpected use cases, or hard to say what is the right decision. And on the other hand, let's say if we do it first without, and it seems to bloat the interface, and we iterate upon moving it to settings, etc. It's not something that we're closing doors. Oh well, I'm digressing.
Anyway, so the last thing is most of the improvements that I had proposed in this. Couple of things that most of the things have been implemented already. And one of the things that James wanted to dive deep into was the discussions tab, a way to highlight unresolved discussions easily. We currently have this button, right? The go to the next resolve discussion button, and that usually doesn't work. It's sort of unpredictable. It sometimes works, sometimes doesn't work, and I'm not able to reproduce the when it's not working. So this was one thing. The sidebar idea, yes, it might work, and I'm still on the wall about how this should be. Maybe it should be a sidebar kind of a thing, or maybe it should be like a bottom bar that we already have for the batch comments. It could be something like that, where you could have the next and previous button. So this is one concept that we can iterate upon. Search, we recently shipped the fuzzy file finder, so on the
I've seen it. Very nice.
So that's cool. And I vaguely remember James wanting to add some improvements to it. though I don't remember. He wanted to add things like commands, like edit or that kind of thing. Very similar to how a text editor would do it. Most of the other stuff have been implemented already. And full file is getting shipped this milestone, so that'll be there. Yeah, everything else is done.
Nice. So because when looking at the board for 11.10 for create, let me see, I see edit project in Web IDE, then fork. Oh, that's nice. Shortcut to create merge requests from Web IDE, also nice. Web IDE allows file names ending with space. Okay, all three Web IDE. See multiple discussions per line, merge request diffs. This is something that I see there was already some old UI by Tori.
Yeah.
And previous design versions. This is the thing we already discussed.
I actually really like Tori's idea here. And this really is we would have to think about this parallelly with how we would do range comments. That is another thing that's in James' radar, which is range comments is like you could select a set, like a start and end for your comments, and that becomes the, how do I say it? That becomes the annotation point. Instead of a single line, you're annotating a set of lines.
Oh yeah, interesting, yeah.
This is something I think Review Board has. I don't have a link. James would definitely have a sample project on Review Board. So, and even Jarrett does that. So you could select, what they do is on the line number, you can drag and select a bunch of lines, and that becomes the starting point of the conversation. That is also, that opens up a situation where you could have overlapping sets. So how do you represent that?
Yeah, and it's very interesting.
That becomes tricky, and that is something closely tied to multiple discussions per line situation. But Tori's markup is very simple and straightforward. It doesn't really complicate it, but it does make it harder to discover. And
GitHub the file perhaps to be broader, and select strokes instead of just points. I know there's some flexibility there.
Yeah, GitHub conveniently has a plus button that is outside. So starting a new conversation is very easy. That button is always accessible. Maybe that's an angle we can look at.
Yeah,
but this shouldn't be a big thing.
Very interaction-heavy designs, I feel, and very hard to support mobile.
Yeah, very hard to support mobile, and and there's a lot of it fits into a lot of gray area. Like it could be right, could be wrong. Maybe some user research would help on what is intuitive here, because it's very easy to take some already existing solution, but GitLab users won't understand how it's there. And we'd have to make it work everywhere. It'd have to work in the commits page. It had to work in the every page that has a diff. Yeah.
Increases scope dramatically.
Yeah. And that commits page was something that James was discussing about. We wanting to add the file browser in the commits page as well. We didn't add that at all. It's sort of nobody uses the commits page.
True, it's very underused. And even if you're selecting a commit in a merge request, you won't get referred to the commit page, but you're looking at the commit within the merge request context, right?
Yeah. That was one of the epics that James had created, which is code review everywhere, because he wanted to make commits more useful. So this is one of his very ideas. He wanted to make commits. You should be able to add a comment on the commit message itself. It's not like so in a merge request page, currently new commits are shown as system nodes. So it could contain like an icon button to start a comment there, and that could open up a new conversation. That was some of the ideas that we floated, but we
makes sense in my opinion. I think we're frozen out, but I mean, in Slack you can also emoji on a system action, right? Like, hey, this person got added, or I know the channel message got changed. You can give it a thumbs up. It's a very minimal thing, but it adds value to some extent.
Yes, and we could even do that to system nodes. I mean, one of the things I really like in Slack is the bot messages, or simple things like somebody leaving or joining. Those are also reactable, and that adds so much emotion to the conversation that that's something we should try to capture in the discussion tab.
Exactly.
Finally, I think this should be around April, which is James wanted to go ahead with live coding inside the web IDE. This was, we didn't have much discussion on this other than the fact that this would be inside the web IDE, and simply because the DAO didn't really have any concrete solution to do WebSockets. We would need all the WebSockets power to implement chat and live coding. Chat was also discussed, but we thought of going with live coding first before we get into any kind of text chat. But that is something we don't know. Like, the design management is going forward, so I'm not sure how James would prioritize between design management and live coding. Live coding was originally in the roadmap, but design management just came out of nowhere, and we had to prioritize that. And another thing that took a backseat was improvements to wiki and snippets.
Yeah.
We've been postponing it for a couple of milestones now. Not sure when it'll be prioritized.
Yeah, I've seen the discussion between Victor and James about wikis, and I know there is some, I'd almost say, overlapping ideas also with Jason Lenny's GitLab pages, which is in the release, which all have this sort of like confluence kind of potential.
Yeah.
And which area is it?
Adding authorization to the GitLab pages, right?
Yeah, and that as well. Yeah, true.
Yeah, that would also bring in. I mean, if we could make that, if it would make adding authorization very easy, that would make organizations set up wikis, internal wikis. That can really go up against Confluence. Confluence was a name that was thrown around a lot during my discussion with James. But James was a little scared because the moment you're having Confluence as something you're aspiring to, you will add a lot of unnecessary features, and he wanted to keep it close to Git as possible. It should be updatable via Git. That's important. So we just had some high level discussion. We didn't put anything into action, and we couldn't find time to schedule it. So it's floating there.
Yeah, sounds good. I think I will have a discussion with James as well to see, like, hey, what is the actual thing? What is going to be put into 11.10? And dictate. Let's settle down on the exact scopes we're intending for implementation on 11.10 and see what we can postpone as much as possible.
Yeah.
But this helps a lot. Yeah, I think this is very valuable. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And if you need anything, like if you have any doubts or something, you can totally ping me. I mean,
Sure.
Yeah. I would definitely step in and help. And that's the thing. I would keep an eye on the GitLab design repo because all the discussions happening there are so valuable to just read. And I'm not going away.
Wait, let me stop the recording.